We will now be beginning with our sessions for the conference. For this, I would like to call upon Dr. Sanjay Bhavnani, Managing Director and COO of MMS Maritime India. He would be giving his valuable advice and thoughts on settlement rights of seafarers, which has been a major concern for the maritime legal industry. I invite Dr. Sanjay Bhavnani ji on stage.
Respected Union Minister of State, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways and Tourism, Mr. Shripad Naik ji. Respected Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, Upa Lokayukta, Government of Maharashtra. Respected SCI Managing Director, Captain B.K. Tyagi ji, and of course, the all-gracious and ever omnipresent Mrs. H.K. Joshi. You continue to inspire us, and of course, this today is also really no exception. Also, the advisory board of Marex Media, the staff of Marex Media, Captain Chadha, and all others. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and express my ideas and speak to such an illustrious audience here. I know I have got a very limited time at hand, so I have to do maximum possible justice to it. So before much ado, let me go on to the entire subject at hand. I have been briefed by the organizers to talk about the various rights, which are the so-called burning issues. And it is these issues which will be debated at length by the various panelists subsequently. And then at the end of the entire conference, we will be able to establish what would be the best way forward. So my job right now is just to get the ball rolling and to get all the panels into the right frame of mind so that with all these issues can be discussed further in detail. So first of all, the international shipping industry is responsible for the carriage of at least 80% of the world trade. Shipping is considered to be the lifeblood of the global economy, as we all know and understand very well. Without shipping, the intercontinental trade, the bulk transportation of raw materials, and the import-export of affordable food and manufactured goods would simply not be possible. The seaborne trade continues to expand, bringing benefits for consumers across the world through very competitive freight costs. Hence, if we were to look at some data over the last 4 decades, total seaborne trade estimates have quadrupled from just over 8,000 billion ton miles in 1968 to over 32,000 billion ton miles in the year 2008. Notwithstanding the current situation, the longer-term outlook for the industry remains very good because the world's population continues to expand and emerging economies will continue to increase their requirements for the goods and raw materials that shipping transports so safely and efficiently. As the below graph, can you just go up a slide? No. Before. Yeah. The volume of the world trade carried by sea has again begun to steadily increase in recent years, which basically means that the fact that shipping continues to be the most fuel-efficient and carbon-friendly form of commercial transport should work in favor of an even greater proportion of the world trade being carried by sea. At the same time, let's also recognize by acknowledging the fact that shipping is one of the most dangerous professions in the world. The very nature of shipping and the very nature of the environments in which the industry operates makes seafaring one of the most dangerous professions in the world. If you were to just look at a few shipping losses which have taken place over the last few years, we find that there is a downward trend, but at the same time, the number of losses have not really been insignificant. So we need to recognize this particular aspect as well. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now let's look at the aspect of the seafarers who are right at the middle of this entire industry, who are the ones who are running all these ships. Long periods away from the family, this is a very demanding profession. Probably that's an understatement. Communication, despite the present modern means, is still very limited. The challenge is to maintain the relationship bond in spite of the huge physical distance. Exchanging endearments and having arguments can still pose to be a very big challenge. Emotional and physical hardships constantly surround the families, as do missing regular family and social gatherings. Overall, seafaring is branded as a highly irregular job due to the above, as well as physical absence from home on so many occasions. Let's come on to the aspect of the seafarers' rights. Seafarers' rights need to be respected, and they need to be safe, and they need to be secured. I think that's a very basic and an elementary aspect. The principles of natural justice and equity need to be upheld. They need to be enshrined within the organizational policy of just culture. Fair terms of employment should be delivered through decent living and working conditions. There should be a mechanism of fair wages, special protection covering medical, employment, and the retirement issues. Let's talk about the various complexities which we are confronted with. Systemic challenges create risk to the human rights, and if we were to look at the very recent pandemic which we experience, and probably in many respects continue to experience, expose failures in addressing seafarers' fundamental rights. The complex nature of shipping and the difficulties this creates for seafarers to have their rights and needs met and fulfilled would basically require a different kind of a perspective to be adopted henceforth. The customers and the cargo owners need to ensure that seafarers' rights are a key part of the vetting processes, ensuring that bad actors are not rewarded. The industry relies on the seafarers, and they very much rely on us. And seafarers, as a very basic thing, should not be treated as a commodity, and we need to treat them with respect and decency what they deserve. We need to look at the other various challenges which our global industry is confronted with. We need to ring-fence seafarers' rights to decent working conditions which pertain to seafarers' work and life at sea, including social security and employer liability. There needs to be a protection against poor practices and unfair competition. It is very important to foster fair competition for ship owners. Requirement of an international regulatory response of an appropriate kind and effectiveness thus becomes essential. That is what should be established so that we are able to aim to establish standard shipping and eliminate all the substandard elements of the industry henceforth. We have the so-called Seafarers' Bill of Rights. This was a milestone in the drive to promote decent working conditions. The Maritime Labour Convention, as it is known as, addresses the whole spectrum of seafarers' work and life at sea, including the various controversial issues such as social security and employers' liability. The convention, reported as the fourth pillar of the international maritime regulatory regime, together with SOLAS, MARPOL and STCW, has the potential to boost the prosperity of the maritime transport sector. And that's what we need to harness by really recognizing what it can do. Let's come on to the various issues which are there. Number one, non-payment of wages. This is what is one of the issues which the seafarers are regularly confronted with. This is one of the main concerns reported by the seafarers basically all over the world. Delay or non-payment of wages will have a significant impact on the workforce's moral and stress levels. It is detrimental to seafarers' family who rely on breadwinners to meet their living costs. In 2020, the ITF recovered $44 billion in terms of unpaid wages. These reports illustrate that despite the implementation of the MLC, wages remain a source of grave concern. Seafarers also expressed concern about timely payment of wages, also issues related to underpayment, also about practices of double accounting and security for wages and jobs. Seafarers were prepared to turn to lawyers to recover their wages. However, the lawyers and the other stakeholders were unable to really fathom and gather the entire context in which the entire industry was operating. Hence, there would be a need to be able to bring all the stakeholders on the same platform to have a same level of understanding. Next issue which is there is also regarding food. Food is a very emotive topic, and accordingly seafarers indicate that food quality is low, laden with salt and fat, and healthy options are scant. The literature also reveals that menu weariness, where food variety is insufficient, there the menus become repetitive. Seafarers complain that dietary provisions do not take into account religious and the cultural diversity. While the food satisfaction barometer showed a slight increase in the last quarter of the year 2021, the seafarers indicated that supplies were not of the quality or quantity they expected or they had in the past. Food provisions, especially healthy food options, were not really that much experienced as much as they should have been. Also, very recently there was an incident in the aftermath of what might be the worst ever case of multiple fatalities from suspected mass food poisoning of the crew of the bulk carrier Wu Zhao 8, which resulted in 13 crew deaths, and 8 crew were also hospitalized in addition. Attention has been turned urgently to the safety of food consumed by seafarers on board, to training in safe food preparation, and to the important provisions of the Maritime Labour Convention and the crucial role of the Casualty Investigation Code. Next one, please. Another aspect is denial of the seafarer's right to repatriation. A seafarer has a basic right to be repatriated at no cost to him in all standard circumstances. If the seafarer's employment agreement expires while he is on board, when the seafarer's employment agreement is terminated by the ship owner or by the seafarer for justified reasons, or when the seafarer is no longer to carry out his duties under his employment agreement or cannot be expected to carry out or expected to carry them out in the circumstances which are to follow, the cost of repatriation cannot be deducted from the seafarer's wages or other entitlements unless the seafarer is in serious default of his obligations. The right to repatriation should include transport to a place where the seafarer signed his employment agreement, that is his country of residence, place stipulated by the collective agreement, or such other place as may be mutually agreed with the ship owner. Next one, please. There is also a fundamental right of compensation entitlements which come under contract and law. In the event of death or a long-term disability due to work-related illness or injury, it is usually the ship owner that must provide the compensation. This liability starts from the beginning of the employment contract until the seafarer has been repatriated or until he/she can, for example, claim medical benefits under an insurance or a compensation scheme. How and to what extent the ship owner must provide compensation may be set out in the national law, the employment contract, or any other CBA if so applicable. Due to the global nature of shipping, seafarers also have special protection under international law in the case of death and injuries at sea. And I'm sure these are the topics which will be discussed further during the panel discussion and probably beyond. Well, these are not so infrequent cases of abandonment. This is another serious and unfortunate trait of the industry. The issue has plagued the shipping industry for decades. It is a question which has involved both the IMO and the ILO. Abandonment imposes significant hardship on seafarers and their families. Seafarers are not only denied the wages, but also essential supplies such as food, drinking water, fuel and medical care, etc., etc. Importantly, the uncertainty of not knowing when they'll be paid and repatriated causes considerable stress. In 2021, the ILO abandonment database registered a record of 95 cases of abandonment, including 1,399 seafarers, a 10% increase from the previous year, but a leap of 138% from the year 2019. This increase can be partly explained by the pandemic, which inflicted heavy financial losses in this sector. However, abandonment tarnishes the industry's reputation and it has done so long before the pandemic came into existence. In 2019, the crew of one vessel, MV Tamim Aldar, made the headlines when they were finally released after more than 3 years at sea. At that time, it was reported that over 5,000 seafarers had been abandoned between the year 2004 and 2019. Each of these cases has impacted real people who experience stressful, inhumane and unsafe consequences, and their families are equally affected. Such cases necessitate the substantial involvement of the IMO and the ILO Secretariat, besides Seafarers and Ship Owners Association in the national country of the seafarers, together with all the other representative bodies. Next one. Very important aspect relating to the fair treatment of the seafarers. Seafarers are often described as an invisible workforce, and yet when accidents and incidents occur, all too often they become visible for all the wrong reasons. In a number of high-profile cases, seafarers have been detained or imprisoned, often facing criminal charges, being deprived of the liberty and badly treated without having faced a trial or being able to respond to the accusation made against them, which is definitely not fair, to say the very least, especially when the seafarer's actions are dictated by events outside his or her immediate control. The prospect of criminal charges is daunting for any human being, whether it is in their own country or even more so in a foreign country. And so it is for the seafarers entering foreign ports on a daily basis. Ships routinely operate within and across different national jurisdictions. The average ship spends a greater part of its time in areas that are beyond the jurisdiction of any specific state. For them, the risks are high and the consequences can be dire if a fair and due process is not followed. It is hoped that this kind of movement will gather weight, will gather more amount of the backing, and there would be something done about this before long. It seems that so much more remains to be done to protect this body of essential workers from unfairness and injustice, but the effort is not only for the protection of serving seafarers, but also to improve the image of the profession for the new recruits to come. This practice of charging masters and ship officers, as well as other crew members with criminal offences, has attracted widespread attention in recent years, both within and beyond the shipping industry. The use of the term criminalization in this context is perhaps an emotive one, but it reflects a widespread concern across the shipping industry that seafarers in particular, but also the wider shipping industry, are being unfairly targeted by the various prosecutors. For seafarers, the risk of facing criminal charges is an ever-present one. Being subject to diverse criminal laws on a daily basis is not a situation that many workers have to face. In these circumstances, the need for seafarers to be able to rely on safeguards in criminal procedures and defenses in criminal laws is high, whether they are facing criminal charges or in some other way implicated in a criminal prosecution. There was a survey which was conducted a few years back of 3,480 seafarers of 68 different nationalities to find out how many seafarers had faced criminal charges. And they were also asked about the views and suggestions. The findings raised a number of significant issues. How much more time? 5 minutes. Thank you. The findings in the survey raised a number of significant issues and highlighted the frequent lack of due process for those who face criminal charges. 8% of seafarers and 24% of masters stated that they had faced criminal charges. 91% of seafarers who had faced criminal charges and who needed interpretation services were not provided interpretation. 90% did not have legal representation. 88% did not have the legal rights explained to them. 80% felt intimidated or totally threatened. 46% said that they would be reluctant to cooperate fully and openly with casualty inquiries and accident investigations. Overall, 81% of the seafarers who faced criminal charges did not consider that they had received fair treatment. 85% were concerned about the aspect of this particular term, which goes as the criminalization. Criminalization by itself is not rampant, but the fear of criminalization is. Next one, please. Okay, anyway, there is an element also of piracy, but piracy, I'll just run over it very quickly. Global economic cost of maritime piracy is immense. Estimates once upon a time stated $72 billion annually. Human cost of piracy is incalculable. Masters and crew have been held for ransom along with their vessels, and they have languished in captivity for as long as 4 years, often under abusive, abhorrent conditions until the demands of the captors have been met. Others have been killed during fights between pirates and naval forces as revenges for attacks and non-payment of ransoms. Even those who are eventually released face ongoing problems of post-traumatic stress, and many are not compensated at all, not even for their lost wages. Hopefully, this aspect of piracy, which we are seeing lesser and lesser incidents now, will continue to be on the wane, and at some point of time, we will be able to control it to the required extent. We have other issues also which are relating to fatigue, which are also related to extra workload, but those are things, which probably would need to be discussed and debated on, not really from a legal point of view, but more from an operational point of view. We have other issues, specifically within the Indian context, and I'm sure our esteemed panel will discuss about that in detail, and they will be taking all these points to their logical conclusion. Next slide, please. Of course, we cannot end any talk without talking about COVID-19, how COVID-19 impacted the MLC, or how MLC was impacted by COVID. The pandemic became a turning point in the socio and economic organization of the world. Not surprisingly, it had and continues to have a considerable impact on maritime trade and its workforce. The integrity, authority, and reputation of the MLC 2006 was seriously undermined, and a completely new COVID-19 amendment is therefore needed to ensure a full and effective enforcement of the convention in the future. We did have a lot of things, but for paucity of time, I will go further. I think that's all. That's all from my side. Which is the next slide? That's it. So with this, I would like to thank everybody for listening to me. And I will now look forward to getting the views from our esteemed panels. And I'm sure we will be able to take all these points and understand what will be the best way forward for this. So once again, thank you very much.
I would also like to call upon Dr. Bhavnani once again on stage, and Captain Kamal Chadha, if you could felicitate Dr. Bhavnani for sharing his valuable thoughts here with us today. Captain Pankaj Kapoor can also join.